everybody, it's Cheryl. I'm gonna work on this Cuckoo Quail, GK Cuckoo Quail clock that I got several months ago. I've already taken it apart and cleaned it, reassembled it, adjusted it, got everything striking right in, and then something went off on the adjustments. So now when the clock goes off, it just keeps going. Let's get it running. This is not lifting high enough to let it run. It's binding when it gets down in that hole in the slot in the count wheel. And it's not trying to shut off when it's down in the count wheel. So it's just going until it puts enough pressure on the arm that it's catching on the side of the count wheel. If it doesn't catch, it just keeps on running. So I've got to take this out of the case and adjust this time side cam and lever again. So let's do that. I've got the movement out of the clock. I use a little twist tie to hold up my Quail lever because otherwise it gets stuck. Like it can fall too far down and then it jams and keeps the Quail side from turning. So I've tested it. And I'm going to have to take it apart and adjust something. I'll show you. That's 2, that's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then this will be the hour because this arm, there's 3 sets of Quail calls on the Quail time wheel. It'll do 15, 30, 45 minutes and the hour. 3 different times on this wheel. Instead of them putting one tiny wheel where it goes around one time each time, it goes a third of the way each time. So as this pin right here, there's 3 pins on there, as one of the pins approaches the arm, it's going to lift this side and put the strike-in warning at the 1 hour time. So I'm going to put some pressure on these wheels. Hang on, let's get that one locked again. See how it's popping in and back out again. That's what we're going to work on. It's not stopping at the right time. Okay, so it's locked in there. Alright, so here's our 1 hour. Notice the arm's going up. It's lifting that. It lets as that drops, it should lift up out of the notch and slide along the smooth part. You don't want it raising up too high because your cuckoo bird will bob as the arm goes up and down. So you want it sliding along the top, but you don't want it adjusted so low that it won't come out of that hole. Okay, so that's where it turns off. It's locking down in the hole. And then if you look in the side of this lever right here, the lever on this top arm falls into the cam on the second wheel. So you want it locked and on the second wheel cam. Lever locked in the cam. And then look and see where your pin is on your third wheel. It should be at the front of the lever. Let me get a pointer. Okay. So this lever has to fall into this cam, and then the pin on this one should be up against the front side of the lever, but it's not, it's way up here. So that's why it's letting it continue to turn a little bit further and start the next cycle. So I'm going to have to split these apart and turn my wheel so that it's closer to this lever. I'm going to try to loosen this side enough to turn the wheel without loosening the Quail side so much that it slips out of place. I got this cool little tool out of my grandfather's house. They used to make neat things that they don't make as much nowadays, I think. going to put that one all the way up, that one halfway up, and then we're going to slightly loosen these. And let's see if we can do this. So right now, the lever is down in the cam nicely. I don't know if I can show you this. But I will try. This lever goes across in front of this wheel, drops down right here. And you can see the cam that's on the other side of this wheel with the little pie-shaped piece out of it. You want the piece to be straight vertical, straight horizontal, so that this arm, the detente, will fall down in there like it's supposed to. So when that is all in position right there, you need to hold that and see where your pin is on the third wheel, and it's way up here. There's no way it's going to stop it because it's going to move that much further before it hits the detente on that lever. So that's what we're going to move. We're going to move this third wheel. I'll open this up a little bit more. Governor fan comes out pretty easily. Third wheel is already loose from me loosening everything. So I'm going to hold it together. Let me put some eyeballs on. Zoom back out so y'all can see. Okay, second wheel is in the hole. I'm not sure if it's in the hole on the front. I think it is. Okay. Cam is straight up and down. Lever is in the cam. And then this is out of the hole. I can spin it. Normally when you're setting this movement up, this side of the movement up, you want that pin that stops this side of the movement to be at the 9 o'clock position, no, 3 to 4 o'clock position. If you were looking at it from the front, right now it's at about 3 o'clock. It needs to be at 4 o'clock to stop all of this side soon enough. So disengage it from making contact down here. I can spin it, then put it back in the hole. Hold it tight. I'm going to put the wheel, put the nut back on it and try it in this position. It's a lot of trial and error with these Cuckoo Quails. I worked on this movement for about 2 weeks when I initially took it apart and cleaned it to learn how the Quail side worked and how the strike side worked. And I can explain that later, but there's 2 pins on the warning wheel over here that make this side go into warning and run. And there's 2 on this third wheel also. So one side one side of the wheel stops the movement from working and the other side puts it into warning. So it hits on different things. This same wheel does all the work. In other clocks, it hits, the same pin hits two different spots, two different levers. In this movement that GK put together, both of the third wheels have a pin on the top and the bottom, and they hit different things to put it into warning and to stop the strike from going further. So let's see what we got. I feel like I've got pressure on this from something I don't have. Something, okay, I see. My verge slipped out. When you have three different trains on the same movement, it's very challenging. Keeps you learning, keeps it interesting. There's a lot to do. Okay, everything is still in on the Quail side, and that was all that came out on the times train. So, let's see where we are. Wrong way. Still popping back out. Alright, I want to see where it is right there. I went a little bit too far. If you look, my pin is now on the back side of the lever. Instead of hitting in front of it and stopping it right there, it went a little bit too far by the time the lever fell into the cam, and now it's right behind it. So now it's going to run too far for that reason. So that's why I say 4 o'clock is a good spot to put that pin. You don't want it... Okay, and that's what I did. I'm telling you about the pins on the top and the bottom, and I'm not paying attention. This top pin, I put the top pin at 4 o'clock. And the bottom pin is what needs to be at 4 o'clock. If the top pin's at 4 o'clock, then my bottom pin is past where it needs to be. The top pin is what catches when it goes into warning. You'll notice when you clean it and take it apart, that top pin is bent in. And I thought, oh, that's not right. It's gotten bent somehow. It was bent in for a reason, because otherwise it hits the wheel on your time train. So, warning pin on top, strike stop pin on the bottom. So I'm going to loosen it and try again. I believe I have everything adjusted. So I'm going to test it by turning my minute arbor. This wheel turns this wheel, which has the 4 points behind it that your Quail falls off of. So I'm turning this, put some pressure on this, and you'll see the Quail goes off. Keep bumping these side levers with my hands, and that's what I don't want. You can test it all you want with these side levers, but when you put it in the clock and put the hands on it, or put it on your test stand and the hands are what's actually actuating this, sometimes you find out you've got this adjusted too tight against the pins and it won't work. So before you put it all back together, test it by turning this and make sure that this activates this and activates the strike side. So here we go again. Let me put a little pressure. There's one, my Quail. 30-minute coil, 45-minute coil. This should be the hour. It's hard to hold and make it all work. It's poking me. Something is binding. This is turning easily. This is turning easily. I don't know, I must have had my hand on something. Alright, it seems to be shutting off right now. When I look, the cam is straight up and down. The pin is against the lever. So I'm going to put some chains on, some weights on, and test it for a little bit. I've got it on the stand. It's working pretty well as far as the Quail side, but the Quail side wasn't the problem. So there's 15, 30, 45, here's the hour. And it's not running. And I have troubleshooted. I'm like, why is it not running? Watch. Watch. It's about to turn a little bit. It's making a lot of noise. It's done that before when it was in the case. That warning pin is hitting on the tooth on the time train. I told you there was a pin on either side of that third wheel. 1, 2, third wheel. Pin on either side. Pin on the inside of the movement. Pin on the inside of the movement catches on the lever right there to stop the strike. Pin on this side of the second wheel. Where are we? Right there. Pin on this side of the second wheel. Puts it in warning. When it goes around, it catches right here on this little lever. Wait, I'm not in focus. When it goes into warning, the pin on this side of the second wheel catches right here on this little bent down lever. So, the problem is where this pin is placed. It's right here, and it's so far out that it bumps against, like it goes right here. Let me get a good picture of it. Right here is the pin. And part of the time, see right now there's a gap. The time it's turning, no problem, it's not touching it. So what changed? Like, this is why it messed up when it was in my case after it had been running for months. Why did this wheel move? Why is it now no longer touching it? That's what I have to troubleshoot, but anyway. Just in case your clock is doing this kind of crazy thing. We'll see if it does it again. Watch right there and it should go into warning. And it's caught. Yep, see, it's caught on the teeth when it should spin around and go into warning. It's catching on these teeth. So I'm going to have to bend this pin in some so that it doesn't hit. See, it's gone around one time and it's hitting on the teeth again. And it'll go around one time and hit on the teeth again. And then when it does finally run, it makes a horrendous racket. you see why it's doing that. But it is shutting off. That was the initial problem. Okay. It's on my test stand, and I have to say that this movement has been the most challenging movement I've ever worked on, because it's complicated and it's got 3 trains, but also because when you adjust it, it just doesn't seem to stay in adjustment. So you line up everything on the strike side and you think it's good, and I'm just going to run it through the whole cycle and you're going to see what it does. So did you notice the first time I did it, it went off twice. It did 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, or 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Now it's doing 2 hours again. Did 3 o'clock fine. Six and 7. Eight and 9 together. And 10. So, this is the most that it's gone off. Usually once in a 12-hour period, it'll pick some random hour and go off twice. That's what I've been dealing with, trying to fix this clock. I started working on it in December, and then I just stopped and left it for a while, so I've just now gotten back to it. I can make a few more adjustments, try and fine-tune maybe a millimeter on the strike lever arm, see if that helps. But I'm starting to think it needs bushings because it's random when it happens. It's not the same hour every time that it goes off, that it messes up. I'm going to check these pivots, and I've checked them before, but usually on a one-day Cuckoo clock you can get away with not replacing any, putting any bushings in, but I feel like that's probably the newer movements that have thinner plates. You can see the wiggle, the slop they call it, when it wiggles side to side. So even the winding arbor's got a pretty good bit. So since I've got new KWM reamers and bushings, I'm just going to mark which ones are too loose and put new bushings in. Some people will scratch on the brass. I don't like to do that. I use a Sharpie, sometimes a green Sharpie because it doesn't show as much. I'm going to put a black Sharpie on there, and that way I can take some rubbing alcohol and wipe it off when I'm done, because I don't think that a 115-year-old movement needs to be scratched up just because it needs some work. So they say 10% side to side needs a bushing. It's hard to get to some of these, but these definitely move side to side. That one not as much. That one definitely. This one even makes a little noise when I wind it, so I'm going to check the clicks out and the ratchet mechanism on that. Debating on this wheel. Probably will. Sometimes this locks up and doesn't tick anymore, and I touch it, the pendulum wire, and it starts moving, so a good bit of wear in my verge assembly. I'm going to have to take these off to get to that. It's hard to get it to not just go in and out, but to go back and forth or up and down. That one moves slightly, but I don't think it's enough to be a problem. Pretty snug. Depends. You got to get it in the right position to see what it's really doing with tension on it. The wear. So this gear turns this way. No, it turns that way. And that makes a difference because that's the side that's going to get wear. Where that black line is, where I put the black line, this wheel turns this way, that wheel turns that way, so it's putting pressure on the right hand side of the hole when it turns. So you got to get it moving that way to see really how much play you got. And then this one would turn this way. Okay. And this ratchet wheel is not nearly as loose as this one is. Okay, I'm going to get some pliers and get this off and check the time side and the back side and get started. I'm working on the bushings. I've gotten 2 in so far, front and back. You'll notice I started marking which ones I was going to do. I ended up deciding I was going to redo all of them. But I did put a little C and a little Q because when you have this apart, you get confused really easy when you're, which hole you're working on, which side you're working on, whether you're on the inside, the outside. So I left my birds attached so I could double check myself, and I put some letters on there. So for these first 2, they haven't been bad. The fan went nicely. It's got good in play, in shake. This one, not so much. I worked on this one this morning, but then I had to go to work, so I had to come home this evening and fix it. I had to take a smoothing broach and open it up a little bit, but I discovered in watching it spin, once I did get it spinning good, that it was wobbling back and forth. So this wheel was a little bit bent. Probably the end of this was a little bit bent, the pivot, from being slid into a case that was held too tightly together. The screws were on it too tightly and trying to slide it into the hole. So I was able to get it straight and get it smooth and get it spinning nicely. I can show you how I did that. I have a little staking tool. That I put it in. Found the right hole. And just bent it back straight again. Watched it spin, bent it back straight again. As far as the warp in the wheel, it's a little bit harder to flatten out a wheel that's your warning wheel. It's got the pins on either side for this movement. I was able to put the center arbor in a hole and put the warning pin in a hole and just tap it flat and then flip it over and do the same. Find a hole for the other side of the warning pin. And Probably wasn't on camera for that. Maybe. Okay. So a block of wood with a hole in it's always a good thing because you got a piece hanging out. You can put it in the hole and then still tap around and flatten out your wheel. The brass is malleable. I mean, it's firm, but if you're putting some pressure on it, you're going to get a little bend in it. So once you put your front and back plates back together, always check your spin. See if they're wobbling when they spin. Make sure the end shake is going back and forth. What I noticed with this one when I had it together, the end shake, it would spin sometimes and then it wouldn't sometimes. It would kind of get stuck in this back plate and then not want to spin. And then I could pull it down toward the front plate or excuse me, backwards. It would get stuck in the front plate and I could pull it down toward the back plate and it would spin freely. So obviously this one was the problem, the one that was getting stuck. So a little smoothing broach, open it up a little bit, make sure your pivots are straight, and you should be good to go. So we're going to measure for the next one. I'm just going down front and back. I'm going to I started on the Quail side. I'm going 1, 2, 3 down in order, and then I'll do this side and then the time. Whatever order you want to set up, but you need to do it in order or you're going to end up missing them. It's a lot to remember when you've got it all apart. I will show you how to find what bushing to use. And this is for KWM bushings. I'm not familiar with the Birchion, I believe it is. I haven't looked at them. I don't know how they work. This seemed the most logical to me. I searched and searched through the other ones and really couldn't understand what I needed to order for what. So the KWM made more sense to me. These sheets with all the different bushing sizes you can find in a different online clock parts ordering places. And so I just printed off one so that I would have one to write on. Your first thing that you need to know is how thick your plate is. The top line up here. They put it right on top. It's easy to find. You're going to measure how thick that plate is. Because you need to know how thick a bushing you need. This one, 2.7 roughly. So you look on here and there is a 2.7. That's good. So the next thing you're going to do is look down the pivot size. Measure your pivot. So I'm going to go on to the third one, which is this one. This is my third wheel, and this goes toward the back, like so. So on the back side on this third, it's going to actually be, when you start at the bottom first, second, it'll be the second wheel. So I've done the third and fourth wheel so far. So this second wheel, make sure you are, I just put it in the wrong hole just to show you. Like, make sure you are working on the correct hole, because on an older movement that has the, I'm blanking out, the count wheel, that's the count wheel hole. There's threads inside of it if you look really closely, and I need to work on the hole next to it. So make sure you mark that hole really well so that you don't ream out your threads and your count wheel can't fit on there anymore. So this is the one I'm working on. It's going to be the big side toward the back, little side toward the front. So I'm going to measure these pivots next. Measure several times. 1.3, 1.37, 1.33, 1.33, 1.3433. Okay. And this one, 1.27, 1.25, 1.32, 1.34. So roughly the same. This is after you've taken your stone, whatever you're using to polish your pivots and get any ridges off of them. That's when you measure and find out what size bushing you're going to need. So the 1.3s, this one goes 1.25 to 1.30, and this next one goes 1.35 to 1.40. So this one would be a little bit tight. I would have to take a smoothing broach and open it up, and this one may be a touch loose. It would be nice if there was one number in between. Basically, you need to bore it out to 1.45. But that's very particular. So, once you find what line you're going to work on, we're going to work on this one, 1.35, 1.4. Come across to your 2.7 area. So all of these are 2.7. But you just follow across to which column you need in the 2.7s. The bigger your pivot, the further over you go. So that's the first line of 2.7. It's very tiny pivots. The pivots that I'm working on, and as it gets bigger, it just goes further over to there. So this one would be L104. So I'm going to get those out and try them on there and see how they fit. Make a little room. I don't have a ton of room on my desk because I do other things besides clocks here. So this is a bushing assortment. This is the system made in America. See, these are not original German KWM movements. But this is the 2.7 height. And I want 104, which is on the end down here. So I'm going to get out two, one for each side. And I'm going to close it up because otherwise I'm going to bump it and have them everywhere. Alright, so these tiny things, I'm going to hold one so you can look at it better. Maybe you can see. One side is a little bit depressed. That's going to be your oil well when you're done. This side is much flatter. This side dips in. So you want the dipped inside away from you after you've used your reamer and made your hole. So I'm just kind of dry fitting it, seeing if it looks too loose, too tight. I think that would be a good fit. I might try one smaller and see what happens. That's probably not more than 10%, but I'm going to try it. So that was 104, we'll try 103. Because 103 does 1.25 to 1.3. So I could potentially use the smoothing broach and open up the inside of it 1/100th of a millimeter. This is the hardest part of the whole thing. Just getting these little boxes open, man. They are not easy. Okay, I'm going to try a 103. It does fit on there, but it doesn't slide down all the way, which tells me my pivot is not even. It's very easy to get a pivot that's barrel shaped. See how it slid right on that one? It's easy to get a pivot that is barrel shaped, as in you've filed it more on the top and the bottom and the middle is fatter, so it's barrel shaped, or it points in this way or it points out that way. It's hard to polish a pivot and keep it totally smooth if you don't have a lathe. If you're doing things by hand, they are not going to be exact. But I don't have thousands of dollars to spend on fancy equipment for my personal clocks. I think I'm going to go with this down or lower size possibly. I go with 2 different sizes. Okay, so this is going to be the side with the arbor, which is the side toward the back, which is this side. So that's what I'm going to do first. So I'm working on the left hole. I'm going to mark that so that I don't drill out my threads and not be able to put my count wheel back on. Alright, so this system tells you which reamer size you're going to use for those bushings. So I've got, for both of those that I'm using, it's going to take the number 3, which is going to make a hole that's 2.67 diameter to put a 2.7 bushing in it. So the top line is how thick your plate is. Go down and get your pivot size, come across and find your bushings that you need. If I was putting these bushings in, I would also use a number 3. That one a number 2, a number 2. So go across, go down, find your bushing, see which reamer you need. This is reamer number 3. That's the one I have been using on these other 2 holes. You ream it from the inside. You're pushing out the entire time. You want it to stay straight. You want to go slow. You want to be gentle. If you push hard, you can easily get off at an angle. So I am frequently turning this and stopping and looking. Am I off at an angle? Is it sitting crooked? It hasn't really taken hold yet, but you'll feel it when it does. You'll feel the grind, and you'll see a little bit of brass shavings come, and you just have to take your time and be slow at this. It does hurt your hands if you do a bunch of them in a row. Some people will put this bit in an adapter and put it in a cordless drill. I would say you can do that. I would use a vise. I would use something to make sure that I was perpendicular. You got to keep your hole perpendicular. If you get it off some, you're going to bind and your clock's not going to run. So with a reamer, you can do this same thing with cutting broaches, and that's how I did my first clock. This is only my second one that I've put bushings in. The first one I did not have any reamers yet, and I have to thank Mark and Ron Rosenkrantz for working together to get me a set of reamers, because it is much easier with reamers. The cutting broaches worked well, but I made some mistakes with them, and you have to measure and stop on your own, where these are automatically going to make it the right size. So that does make it a little bit easier. With the cutting broaches, I cut the hole too big the first 2 or 3 times. I wasn't measuring the cutting broach right. If you are going to use cutting broaches, they're great. They work great. They actually work faster than these, I feel like. But measure your cutting broach while you turn it in your calipers. Don't just measure it static, because when you're turning it, that's how I ended up making the hole too big several times, and I thought, well, I've measured something wrong. So I did it again, and I got a hole too big a second time, and it's like, okay, I'm definitely doing something wrong. So I spun it while I measured, and it added that extra 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters, and that's why my holes were too big for my bushings. So if you're going to use cutting broaches, just turn it in your calipers and it'll give you an estimate. And you can put some tape on it, or like masking tape, or use a Sharpie and draw a line for how deep you need to go to get the diameter hole that you want. And then stop before you get to that point and measure with a bushing and see if you're close, because it's very easy to pass it up. And I did pass it up, and Mark was helpful in telling me, first I was going to bush it out, put a bigger bushing, and then put a smaller one inside of it, try to fix it that way. And then he suggested I ping the hole, which I did, and it worked well. I pinged it small enough that my original bushing would fit in it, so it worked out. It was not a super fancy clock. This one, I would be very upset if I made the holes too big because of it being so old. So I'm going to turn. You see how angled I am? I've got to make a conscious effort to straighten up. I'm trying to show you guys while I'm doing it, so it's letting me get a little more angle to it than I normally would. You don't have to turn it. The turning is in the other hand. My right hand is doing all the work of making the hole. I'm turning it with my left hand just to check my alignment and make sure I'm staying perpendicular. So it really takes several minutes to do one. I left this open. Y'all should have told me I left it open. So to do all of these, it's probably going to take me a good week or 10 days, because I'm only going to do a couple a day, because that's what time allows me to do. I don't have a whole day to even work on a clock. I have a little bit of time here and there, so I take advantage of it. Alright, we're just about through. Still looks pretty perpendicular. Okay, so it just went the rest of the way. This, I did explain this. This reamer is round on one side and flat on the other. So the flat part keeps you centered and the round part follows your hole around. If you have a hole that is off center, you're going to have to get a file of some kind. And they sell all kinds of files, different shapes and sizes. Diamond tip files are not very expensive, but you have to file that hole. If it is an oval, egg-shaped, going off to one side from where for years on one side, you have to round out the other side just as far as that side is off center, so that when you put your reamer in there, it is centered and it'll make a hole in the middle. If you just put it in there with a wear pattern off to one side, you're going to move your center hole over by just reaming it at that spot. So file the opposite side of the wear and then center your reamer and make your new hole. So there's another tool called a chamfer. It goes in the hole just to smooth off the edges when you're done. And it does a nice job. Kind of like sanding it. Okay. And then get it out. This is my piece right here. This is my bushing. It will push part of the way in to get it started. And then I just have a little tap that I'm going to tap it down. You want it level on the back side. You should not be able to feel it on the back. That one I may need to tap a little bit more. Alright, so that's flat. I am going to tap that one just a hair, because when I've been testing it, I've had trouble getting the tip of the fan in there. Okay, so there's one. Then you want to check it. Put your piece in. We're doing this one. Make sure it spins freely. Okay, then you're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. So, I'll meet you back after I've done a few more. I decided to put it back together before I did the other side of the bushing, just to check. So just one seemed to be okay, so I put the other two wheels in. Good in shake here. You can hear it. Nothing. It's not got any. And this is the same problem I had with the one above it. Like once I got it back in here, it's like it's getting stuck. So I'm going to use the smoothing broach and open up that one I just put in there a little bit. It will turn, but then it'll lock up too when it gets in the wrong spot and it's too tight. So you don't want that. You want all the pieces freely moving. You want good end play. See, right now it's got good end play, end shake. But it doesn't always. Sometimes it gets very stuck. It should just go click, 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 slide back and forth. Not, that's too much tension on the pivot. So I've only done one, so it's real obvious which one it is that's now causing the problem, because it didn't do that before. So check it frequently. Save yourself some headache. So I'm still working from the inside, smoothing broach, find one that's approximately the right size. They come in sets, they come in assortments. You want it to fit through fairly easily. I mean, you don't want to just barely have the tip through and try to be working. If you can find one that fits further through, that's good. And it's going to get, this is graduated, so if I took it all the way up to here, it would be like I had not done a bushing at all, because it would be so big around that the pivot would be loose again. So all I'm doing is slightly pressure and turn, slightly. It doesn't take much. You can also use this to check your perpendicular, how you did putting your bushing in. It'll get snug, it'll get tight. I've had to back it out to get it out of there. So I'm going to try this and see. See if it's freed it up some. Looks like it's spinning a lot easier. But see how it's binding sometimes? Sometimes it spins, sometimes it's binding. So I'm not there yet. So I will continue to do that a little bit more and put it all back together and test it out again. Continue with my bushings.